Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very accomplished and senior professional from London, UK, Mr. Arthur Weiss. Arthur, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you.
Arthur is the founder and chief executive officer of Aware Consulting on OSINT, which is competitive and marketing intelligence and AI for business. Over the last few years, his focus has shifted to exploring the impact of AI tools like ChatGPT on marketing and competitive intelligence and how they can be used to enhance OSINT-type research. Arthur has also published several papers. So, Arthur, before we talk of the impact of AI tools, tell me a little bit about your own journey and what got you interested in the area of artificial intelligence.
I've always been interested in technology and science. My degree was biochemistry.
Mm-hmm.
When I completed my degree, my dream was to be a biochemist, working with test tubes, doing research, because that's what I thought I'd been trained for.
Mm.
And I still remember one of my lecturers was particularly astute. Said that I shouldn't do that. I should move into information science. And as a young 20-year-old, I hadn't a clue what he was talking about. I'm a biochemist. What's information science? So I got a job working in a hospital or teaching hospital for medical students, doing research and what was called demonstrators. So basically helping with these sort of biochemistry practicals, doing a few talks after the practical, what you could learn. It was a lot of fun, but research certainly then was not for me. I wasn't precise enough. It didn't quite work out. And I was planning on writing up my research when a particular gentleman in Germany, who subsequently I discovered had won lots of awards, became a senior professor, had repeated the work I was doing before I published and essentially published what I was planning to publish. So that disappeared. I then got a job based on, I guess, my scientific background, my biochemistry background, with the British Medical Association, which then was very much of a trade association. Now it's a trade union. I still remember the interview because I went along for the interview and my interviewer, somebody called John Dawson, said, "When can you start?" Yeah, I'd never been to an interview where that day I'm offered the job and asked when can I start. And my contract with St. Thomas's Hospital had finished, so I gave a date. Right, see you. I said I could start now. See you tomorrow. Could I make it start on Monday? Because I wanted a couple of days to be able to sort things out, do my washing, make sure I had the clothes and everything like that. Okay, see you Monday. And I was there for 1.5 years. And part of the job was to computerize their library records.
Okay.
So without knowing it, I was moving into information science. Computerizing their library records with a very, very early desktop computer. When I mean early, we're talking 1980, before Microsoft, anything like that.
I understand. But Arthur, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'd like us to move to the AI part of it a little quickly.
Okay, I'll say the journey a bit more because it is relevant. I then moved to Dun & Bradstreet, and in 1993, one of Dun & Bradstreet's competitors announced they were going to be creating an internet site. Hadn't a clue what an internet site was, knew nothing about the web, and started looking it up. And by 1994, Dun & Bradstreet had its own website. I left in 1995, realizing this is the future. Now, I was one of the early companies on the web. When I mean early, I'm talking the first 100,000 or so, which 100,000 is a big number, but that's not.
Yeah, I understand.
What was there. So I realized that this is going to be the future. There were people saying it's a fad, it won't take off. So this is before Google, I think before Alta Vista, before Netscape, that I spotted something I saw was important. And since then, I've realized that if you get in early and you spot a new technology trend, you can be at the forefront, you can develop it, you can learn from it before the shakeout and all the big players really pile in. So this was the internet in 1995, and it took 5-6 years. Google was 3 years later. But
Right.
it took until, I guess, after the dot-com boom had bust for things to really start taking off. Up until about then, people were saying, well, there's the millennium bug, and it's not going to work, and it's a fad, and it's only for techies. So in 2022, I'd always been interested in the concept of AI, but when ChatGPT emerged on the scene, straight away I started looking at it, and straight away I saw, okay, this is rudimentary, this is early, this makes mistakes, it hallucinates, it's not up to date. But in 1995, that was the internet.
Sure.
It took 5-6 years before there was a shakeout and the market leaders that we see today appeared. And very quickly, I think Google also saw that because they issued a code red and rushed out what the bar now known as Gemini for that reason. So we're in an early stage before a shakeout, which there will come. There'll be some companies will merge, some companies will go out of business, they'll be acquired. And it's going to take 3, 4, 5, 6 years for that to happen, for things really to develop.
Absolutely. So, Arthur, your area of specialization is marketing and competitive intelligence. How have tools like ChatGPT changed the landscape of competitive intelligence?
For some, they are changing it. People are still getting into it. I'm on the faculty of the Institute for Competitive Intelligence, and we've got a conference. Am I allowed to make a plug in September, which will be looking at how AI can be used? A lot of in CI and marketing intelligence, and a lot of CI people are talking about it. There've been a lot of webinars, seminars. I don't think that many have really got to grips with using it. There are still CI people that say human intelligence trumps open source intelligence. They completely diss open source, saying it's not reliable. You can't trust the internet. It's out of date. It can be wrong. It can be biased.
Right.
People can also be biased. The difference is it's harder to verify what somebody tells you that could be complete misinformation.
Correct.
What you can research online, looking at multiple sources where you can verify that source. But there are still CI people that put their faith only in human intelligence. It's part of the game. You need that, and you need open source. And in the future, you'll also need to use AI tools for analysis to verify what you found, and not quite yet to find information, put things together. And I can give an example. Suppose you've got an image and you're not quite sure where that image comes from, what that image is of. You can search for other images. But what about searching where you have suspicions? So you want to combine an image search with a text search.
Right.
Narrow it down. You can do that with AI. You can't do that with Google.
Correct.
So things are going to change in the way that people search and what people do. You can still find rubbish. There will still be rubbish. There'll still be bias because the AI models depend on a massive information, but just collecting it, there is an implicit bias in what they collect, what they see, and how they assess this is important, this isn't important. But you get that with Google. That's the whole thing about Google ranking.
Yeah. So, while there are challenges from, on what Google and what ChatGPT can do, how reliable is the data that is generated by these AI tools for competitive intelligence? Because serious decisions could be taken based on this information.
There's a saying about the most dangerous part of a car is the nut behind the wheel.
Correct. Yes.
Same applies. If you don't assess the information and check it and verify it. So I've used ChatGPT asking fairly basic, simple questions.
Yeah.
I've asked, who are the top authors in a particular field? And in some cases, it's made them up. So if I hadn't checked these up, I'd reported that to a client or a boss or somebody. These are the top decision makers. These are top influencers. Not only would I have made myself look stupid, but if the person I passed it on to would have also looked stupid, and if they'd have acted on it, they could have made real mistakes. So you have to verify the information. Sometimes that can be difficult.
Right.
It wasn't ChatGPT, it was another AI tool that I'd asked a question. It was a question about genealogy. I tried to look into sort of genealogy, and I'd asked this because I wanted to see if I could find any more. And I'd asked several AI tools, and not one of them came up with what I was looking for. But I was thinking, wow, it's found what I already knew and has given me more detail. So I trusted it. I looked at the sources, but it then came up with something that I didn't know, and I still don't know. And it might be true, it might not be true. So it could have been hallucinating, the Google term for making things up.
Correct.
But I still haven't verified what this thing came up with. Or when I asked it, what was your source? It equivocated and said, well, we might have got that wrong. And sometimes the AI tools, when you start questioning them, which is why you must, sometimes they'll give you a source, and sometimes they'll say, I'm only an AI tool. I may have got things wrong, or what's that effect?
Yes, I've experienced that. So moving on, Arthur, just before we started recording, we were talking about the ethics also of AI. I wanted to ask you, what ethical considerations should be taken into account when using AI for competitive intelligence?
Not just for competitive intelligence. For any form of authoring, I believe you need to declare your AI usage. So you need to say this was generated with AI. If you've taken the information, you've verified it, you've rewritten it, that's fine. But if you actually present it as your own work, I'm not sure you can use the word plagiarism, but essentially that's what it is.
Correct.
So one ethical concern, I guess, is in inverted commas, plagiarism. Something off as your own, even though it was your prompt. But there's also the other side where you can use it for disinformation. People are using it to use deep fakes. I'm not sure whether it occurred in the recent Indian election, but people are very concerned about the US elections coming up. And I've not seen this in the UK, but massive disinformation using fakes of candidates to say things they never said. And you can see that already. So I think the ethics are not just competitive intelligence, the ethics are much broader.
Correct.
But within the narrow field of competitive marketing intelligence, it's using them to misrepresent information, to lie about information. That's the ethical concerns. The other concerns, of course, are that, as I mentioned, you find fake information and you pass it off as real.
The other aspect that I also heard, and you are the expert here, is that when billions of bytes of data is being drawn upon by ChatGPT, it is not necessarily looking at what is intellectual property. It is picking up everything that is available. So if you try and pass it off as your own, one could be plagiarism, but one could be also a severe violation of intellectual property. I'd love to get your perspective.
This is why I said we're at that Wild West stage.
Mm.
And if you go back to the late 1990s, and
Yeah.
people talked about the internet being the Wild West,
Mm.
over time, rules and laws came in that have regulated. They're still coming in,
Mm.
but things are much more stable. So intellectual property is a real concern. But I believe that there will be rules. There are already systems out there that are licensing their material to the various AI tools so they can use it.
Mm.
The free use will be regulated. So if ChatGPT takes the works of Shakespeare, that's fine. It's out of copyright. So
Correct.
you can say, write a sonnet, a love sonnet in the style of William Shakespeare to my girlfriend.
Mm.
That's fine. But if you say, probably if you said the same for as Wordsworth or Tagore, that's also okay.
Yeah.
Because it's out of copyright. But
Mm.
if you said something like that for somebody who is
Someone more
alive,
contemporary. Yeah.
copyright, then there's a problem.
Correct.
And even though it's an imagination, it's in their style.
Mm.
There's a difference between writing something in a style and if I Google what has J.K. Rowling written, give me some extracts from Harry Potter,
Mm.
we'll do that. And that's not AI. So if I'm using AI to do
Mm.
search, I don't think there's a problem.
Mm.
As long as it recognizes that you're not supposed to use a certain amount of material
Correct.
that's copyright. So
Correct.
that's from a research perspective, that's legitimate. Writing in the style of, especially if you pass it off, and there I can see an ethical concern because, as I
Mm.
mentioned about the deep fakes, I'm sure I could write an essay written by Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak, Narendra Modi on why such and such a policy should take place, and the
Mm.
AIs will do that.
Yeah.
And there's a real ethical concern if I
Mm.
pass that off, not as my work,
Mm.
but as Narendra Modi's thoughts.
Correct.
Um, so those sort of things, there will need to be some form of regulation.
I agree.
Um, and
Absolutely.
even now, who is the source for that information? So who's published it? And
Mm.
whoever's published it, if they publish something illegal, there needs to be some way to get them.
Correct. Some regulation has to come in. I agree with you.
But
But
we're in a Wild
mm,
West stage. Give it
mm.
5 years.
But just one more question relating to deepfake, and then I want to move on to another question. What impact do you think deepfakes will have on competitive intelligence in the corporate world?
Oh, that's a tough question. Um, at the moment, I don't think it will have. And
Mm.
even if you create a deep fake,
Mm.
anybody with some sort of sense of or critical ability where they can check the information, don't forget if something comes out that's real, it's likely to be duplicated in reliable sources.
Mm.
The real danger is something that looks real that gets shared
Mm.
because it looks real and it appeals to a person's biases.
Mm.
And I've seen examples of that. There's a friend of mine who's a professor in political geography, just shared a whole article that I thought, wow, I really like this. And I also shared it. And lots of other people. And then somebody said, I think that's a fake.
Mm.
David looked at it and said, I normally check things like that. In
Mm.
this case, I didn't. I shared it because David shared it.
Mm.
So these are the real dangers
Correct.
that, and you have to go to the source and verify the information. In this case, it was a speech from somebody in the United Nations who had never worked for the United Nations.
Hmm.
By presenting it as the United Nations, it seemed authoritative.
Yeah.
And that's the danger.
Correct. But for the follow-up question to that, Arthur, would be how can businesses protect themselves from the threat posed by AI-generated misinformation?
The same ways they do now, through some form of critical analysis, saying,
Right.
this makes sense.
Hmm.
What is the source? Go to the original source and verify it's there.
Hmm.
So it's very much what happens now.
Hmm.
And if you don't and you get burnt,
Hmm.
I don't have sympathy for you. The danger is, as I said, something that's a fake that then gets spread by people who you trust and who are reliable
Hmm.
without being verified.
Hmm.
So if, let's say, one company, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
In the UK,
Hmm.
there are a number of, Bailey Gifford is a sponsor of many, many arts festivals.
Hmm.
And there's been a recent boycott or call to boycott by various arts festivals of Bailey Gifford because of their investments in certain defense areas and in primarily their defense of their investments in fossil fuels.
Hmm.
So people who are against fossil fuel usage have been calling to boycott Bailey Gifford and their sponsorship of art festivals.
Hmm.
Barclays has had the same sort of thing with regards to arms deals,
Hmm.
and they just pulled out of sponsorship some arts festivals within the UK,
Hmm.
which may mean those arts festivals collapse.
Hmm.
Without sponsorship, they can't go on.
Hmm.
So the political push against certain companies can harm whole areas. In this case, artists and musicians who want to play at a certain venue who now can't because the sponsor has pulled out.
Hmm.
But to add it to that, some of the artists who were calling for the boycott of Bailey Gifford were being sponsored by another company, I think
Hmm.
called Blackbones, but I can't quite remember, that
Mhm.
apparently had a bigger investment in these areas
Right.
than been highlighted.
Hmm.
So, from a consumer perspective, it can hurt business because protesters will call out companies and may get it wrong, and
Hmm.
companies can do the same thing.
Hmm.
And in theory, they could misinform on their competitors
Hmm.
and damage a competitor, especially if the competitor doesn't know enough to call it out.
Hmm.
I've not seen that example taking place, but it's a potential problem.
Hmm. Wonderful. So I have time for two more questions for you. My next question is, can AI tools help in enhancing critical thinking among marketing and intelligence professionals?
Yes. I've I'm working on a project to show how AI can be used in marketing and competitive intelligence.
Mhm.
The idea being having a number of teams setting prompts
Hmm.
or doing the research. The scenario is your boss has come and said, we need a report on this whole area and whether it's viable.
Hmm.
But you've only got 8 hours to do it. You cannot research
Hmm.
properly that quickly.
Hmm.
So the skill in this case is to create prompts that will take you along, give you results, produce a report, but the critical thinking has to be, does this make sense? And
Right.
one is, what things should I research
Hmm.
for this report? So what are the areas?
Hmm.
What came up was market sizing. Uh, there are things that would probably have taken you 2 hours to prepare that
Hmm.
you did in 5 minutes. So once you got it, You then say, does this make sense? If it makes no sense, it's probably wrong.
Right.
Check it anyway, just in case you've got a bias that means you've not spotted something. But it can speed things up so much that you keep your critical thinking. You can spend more time saying, is this true? Does this make sense? Will this take me forward? And less time in the actual creating the thought processes that take you there. And if you've got limited time, that's what we all need.
Great response. And my last question for you, Arthur. How can companies integrate AI tools into their existing intelligence networks?
Oh, help. If you have a massive database, if you think that when people were talking about sort of data mining, but data mining was very rudimentary. So you bring your database in and you can use it for data mining, not just external information, but internal information. So let's say you have 100,000 employees and you've got their resumes on your database. And you're trying to find people to move to a different location who have particular skills. That's a tough job.
Yeah.
Especially if you want to say who has worked in these areas, who's got the cultural things, what have they done in their previous job? Fit in. So put that whole database, all those resumes and their appraisals and any other information into the AI and get the AI to do it for you. The catch is, do you have permission for them to do that? So maybe that's something in the future that we have to give our companies permission to access our data using AI tools used on internal data. There will be another area of protection.
I'm sure. And on that note, Arthur, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me about your own amazing journey. I think you and I have the same vintage. Thank you for speaking to me about so many different aspects of technology, about artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, the impact, the positive and the not so positive impact that it could have on intelligence, on corporations, on governments, on politics, and on people in general. Thank you for speaking to me and good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.